Hi guys, if you aren't aware, recently I tried and was playing a game known as Black Beacon because I did find it to be very free-to-play friendly. I found it to be interesting, and personally I'm a fan of action combat-esque games. However, in recent times you might have seen that the game has received a lot of negative press and negative reviews and a lot of drama and I guess just bad occurrences and bad news have come out from their industry or from their specific side of the gacha space specifically. So today I just want to cover the game itself, my review of it honestly after playing for a little while, but also basically what's going on. So to start, I do want to say that after putting a decent amount of hours into Black Beacon, I was a fan. I was even someone, to be honest, that got Florence and her weapon very early, and despite it being a free-to-play or more free-to-play game, there is basically no greater incentive for non-content creator but still gacha game enjoying players than being given what you want immediately off the rip or off of one free 10 pull and getting everything that you want, especially on a limited selector or in a limited banner. That said, however, even though the game itself was a pretty good casual game, again with lots of benefits for free-to-play players, unfortunately the launch, as I mentioned early on, was not free of its issues. Now, there were things, of course, like the fact that there wasn't technically an official PC client, and even though there were things like the Google Play client, the controls for it were a bit finicky. It was crashing quite a bit. And in addition to this, we also had the very controversial banning of other emulators, or from what I understand, the disallowance of emulators in order to try to circumvent or I guess bypass these control issues. However, none of these were nearly as controversial as a recent topic that's come up, which is I guess like the topic of the global player base essentially being used as the guinea pigs, allegedly for the China or the CN launch, with a lot of players stating that, well, the really bad launch for global did have some compensation, but upon CN's launch, even if they were to get, and they inevitably did end up getting compensation for their own issues, the issues, or rather the compensation, was much more favorable towards the China side as opposed to the English side. Now, I do want to go over specifically a couple of the good things about the game itself and honestly the treatment of the game before we even get into the controversy itself. But there were some good things, to be clear. We had things, apologies for that. We had things like the standard banner and the 5 stars being obtainable after playing for about 2 weeks, just given the generosity of the game. They also granted you enough pulls through doing the story and such in order to guarantee a limited 5-star, even if you lose the 50-50. Amazing. They also gave us things like 2 5-star weapons, with one being a selector and one being one that you just get for playing the game. And you also were able to buy mindscapes or constellations or extra copies of characters, which was absolutely ridiculous, in a shop similar to Wuwa, which again makes it competitive. But in addition to this, 5-star standard weapons were also buyable in the end game equivalent store, which again is something that is pretty unheard of for gacha games in this modern era. Now, in addition to this, they also have things like the guaranteed weapon on the weapon banner, like Wuthering Waves, which makes it again very, or I should say, more consumer or free-to-play friendly. And in addition to this, the pity, the pity for the characters is 70-30, and the pull currency was about 150, which again puts it on par with most standard Hoyoverse era games. But there is also, the launch issues and some of the drama. But before we get into the biggest or the worst of the details from the launch, I do want to admit and say that after the launch issues were fixed, there was honestly pretty good performances across the board in terms of the story and the gameplay and treatment, and the community as a whole was very happy for a short while when things were being distributed and compensated for, and it felt like the Black Beacon development team was truly listening. But then, of course, we have to talk about the bad. And aside from what I earlier mentioned, or I previously mentioned about the horrible launch and the fact that, again, things like the basic attack were not really bindable in a comfortable setting, we have the compensation that we have to talk about. Now, regardless of which side of the fence that you're on about this compensation, it is objectively true that despite global players having major issues for days, we received 40 standard pulls, 10 stamina refreshes, and some materials. Whereas on the CN side, they received an apology letter, a free 5-star selector, 20 standard pulls, in addition to 10 limited pulls. Now, I am not super keyed in on exactly what one specific detail that I missed about the compensation was. However, if I'm not mistaken, something, whether it was between compensation or a reward or some sort of compensation, was, if I'm not mistaken, limited in terms of how long you could claim it. If you were a global player or something along those lines, where there was a time limited code that you may have had to redeem, and if you didn't redeem it after a certain amount of time, you were unable to receive the rewards. Something along those lines was also distributed, or only specific to global, whereas for China this was not the case. Now, moving beyond this, China players also have ongoing events that global players didn't have access to, which of course means less currency, which again then made players more and more upset. Now, after the drama or the covering of the of this event, and basically the unfairness of the compensation as it was perceived by the community, there was a couple of specific, I guess, apologies written by the devs themselves for the Black Beacon development team. However, they posted this on their Discord, reading that this is Charles, the head of global services for Black Beacon. They wanted to thank everyone for the support, but they've talked about a bit of their roadmaps and promising to communicate more. However, there wasn't any direct guarantee or necessarily an ensured compensation for the disparity in compensation, which I know sounds a little bit ridiculous, but a lot of players, or I would imagine that most players that have level-headed inputs or have level-headed responses and interpretations of what happened, simply just wanted to be treated similar, if not equally. And for those of you, or for players that were expecting more, or to be given more than a separate region, just being absolutely ridiculous. However, there was also another post to kind of, I guess, paint this picture of the Black Beacon devs, at least initially, really going out of their way to kind of speak candidly and honestly with the community. And this was actually in regards to an apology and compensation that they had regarding the announcement, or regarding the launch of Black Beacon. And again, for this, they did announce that they had things like some of the apology, or they announced some of the rewards, and of course they apologized through this. They also, of course, announced or described or officially acknowledged the issues that went on with Black Beacon's launch, which again made players think, or made people believe, that at least initially they were very keyed in and very in tune with, or apologetic and sympathetic towards the player experience, as of course this early poor experience from any gacha game is nothing short of disastrous for any game's launch. Now, of course, with compensation, things like this can be mediated, as other games like Zenless Zone Zero and even Wuthering Waves have bounced back from very tragic or very poor day one, I guess, launches. However, in addition to all this, or I guess as a result of all the, or what has felt like a lack of communication from the you know, the dev team and the player base, there were a lot of people that essentially called for the boycotting of or review bombing of Black Beacon on the App Store, which, again, if you couldn't tell, most games and most apps in general don't even really drop below something like a 4 or a 4.5 in terms of a star rating on any app store. However, as you can see, this is a ridiculous 29,000 review Black Beacon app with a 1.9 star review. Now, again, to be clear, I am not advocating for, or you know, I think there are a lot of different ways to protest or kind of give feedback towards situations that you don't agree with. Whether or not you agree with the review bombing is not the point of this video. However, what is the point of this video is that despite all of this coverage of the ongoing, I guess, poor efforts or the poor communication, there actually has been a follow-up just about half an hour ago as of the time of this recording, which is that after seeing and parsing through all of the feedback from the community, obviously, as you've seen through the, again, things like the review bombing, they've officially accepted or, you know, taken this feedback and given compensation for the disparity of compensation. Again, a term that I know is kind of goofy sounding. Now, first and foremost, we'll be getting time-seeking keys, 20 of them specifically, spherical fruits, gift certificates, all very great, fine and dandy. But in addition to this, we're also being given a 5-star permanent character selector chest, with there being of course, a claimable period for this. But thankfully, this is something that you'll be able to claim, presumably, as with this notice, through the mailbox, as it asks you to at least clear through stage 1-4 in order to unlock the mailbox. But in addition to this, apparently all players across all different regions will receive additional rewards in addition to the compensation above, which I'm assuming in this case are the keys. However, this does feel a little bit weird, as it feels like, again, if this is also granted to China, it doesn't really make sense, as the point of the compensation in this case is because there was a disparity. In whatever case, having the selector chest, having the rewards, having the keys are all fine and dandy and very appreciated. But it is worth mentioning that, again, this is something that has finally hit the main stage, or has finally made waves or had an impact on the entirety of the Black Beacon community, and not just one specific region in particular. And as a result, I'm quite happy for what we've seen, or for what we've been given. Again, truthfully, though Black Beacon is not my main game, it is a game that I do enjoy playing. And again, I am a big fan of characters like Florence. I've always been a big fan of, honestly, action combat games in general. So with the announcement, or with characters like Ching on the horizon, I am kind of curious with how they'll proceed in maybe being more communicative, or having a better line of communication with the player base. This is a good step forward. I just wanted to basically make this video, though, talking about the situation, my thoughts on the Black Beacon situation, and talk about the, I guess, this just in kind of news for the rewards. But as always, guys, that's going to be it for this video. Glad to see the situation changing a little bit. Again, would have been nice if it happened a little bit earlier, but hey, honestly, the feedback and the criticism has yielded something, and I'm more than happy to receive the rewards for it. As always, though, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. I'll see you on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.